Today, we're going to be talking about something I like. Uh, in part because I don't necessarily enjoy making lots and lots of videos in a row about things that I don't like. There are a lot of things that I don't like, and it's important to talk about what's wrong with them, why I don't like them, and how to do them better. But today, we're going to celebrate a mechanic that I genuinely enjoy and kind of always have. We are, as the title may suggest, talking about once per session abilities or per session cooldowns in general. Doesn't necessarily have to be once. If an ability can be used a X number of times per session, that's very clearly different, or it's very clear about how often it can be used, and it's very different than any kind of like cooldown or recharge rate based on in-game time passing. So like D&D in particular, and there's a lot of other games that follow the suit, mostly does cooldowns on in-game rests. So like long rests, short rests, however long, like there's something that happens in-game that causes you to recharge your abilities, to reset the gameplay cycle. Even my Legends and Lore game that I will be soon, I hope, if I can get the motivation together to finish formatting it, we'll be doing a public release of. Should be before the end of the year. Even in that, I have like a rest mechanic where like once you get narratively to a place where the party can, sit down, relax, take a load off, recharge your abilities. It's usually done like in town or, if you make camp for an extended period. So, these things are quite common, well known, and they work fine, I guess. They tend to run into the issue of the adventuring day, which is an issue that has plagued D&D basically since forever. Where you have to, as a GM, you have to balance the pacing of the story versus how many fights the party can handle before they do a reset. If you're not resetting everything every encounter, which is an option, frankly, then you have to take into account that attrition, the loss of hit points, the loss of healing surges, the loss of spell slots, whatever it may be for your particular game. But by doing per session abilities, well, now you don't have to do any of that. Especially if so you still have to kind of take into account health. I don't think I've ever seen a game that does like health damage, that most core part of the cooldown. I don't think I've seen any games that do that on a per session basis, but in theory you could. Right now, I'm in a campaign of The Land of Eam, which is a Kickstarter game that a friend of mine backed, and we've been going through it for a few months now. I think not a year. It's not been a year. We've been going through it for quite a while. And nearly every ability is per session. Some of them you can spend a resource to do additional times, but like the default is once per session for any of your abilities. And I've kind of I've seen this before. I want to say Monster of the Week also has a lot of per session abilities. I might be misremembering, but I've definitely seen this mechanic before. And I've kind of re-fallen in love with it. I think it's a really good idea. And my next game after Legends and Lore is almost certainly going to be based on this, where like everything is per session. It's easy to keep track of. You never have to like mark off between sessions how, whether an ability has been used or not. There's no question about like, oh, do we have time to rest? Can we work in a rest to reset our abilities? Well, maybe, but it's narratively dissonant. We're kind of in a hurry, so are we going to sit down for an hour to recharge? And also, does that feel cheap where like we recharge all our abilities right before a boss fight? These kinds of things can be narratively dissonant. Like, you might be able to justify them, but they feel weird, right? Whereas per session abilities, you have less control over when your stuff recharges because, like, what are you going to stop in the middle of a session so that you start the next session fresh? Probably not. You're going to press forward and kind of get a sense based on how long your sessions usually last. And this is, let me finish this sentence. Get a sense of how long your sessions usually last and sort of meter out your abilities accordingly. Let me retroactively interrupt myself. The variance that you will see at tables is going to be based on how long your sessions are. Characters will be, let's face it, weaker at tables where the sessions are longer because you're stretching the same number of abilities out over a longer period. Whereas if you only play for like an hour and a half, 2 hours versus like 3 or 4 hours, well, you can just sort of spam your abilities a lot harder, which is fine, I think. I think that's actually fine. You would not use per session abilities for any kind of like hardcore tactical gameplay. I think it would not work well for something like D&D. Well, you could make it work for D&D. If you have if you don't have that sort of like grid-based tactical combat. If you wanted to do a D&D style game, but make it more narratively oriented, such as a Powered by the Apocalypse system, like had I thought of it beforehand, I probably would have made Legends and Lore based on per session cooldowns rather than per rest. But it's kind of too late to change it at this stage. So I think it does not lend itself well to tactical considerations because it is a meta recharge, where there isn't anything in universe that you can do to recharge your abilities. So that doesn't work for every game, but I think for a lot of games, particularly like narrative oriented ones, and this works exceptionally well for abilities that are not like explicitly your character making decisions. It's something that your character can do as a result of who they are in the story, not what are their in-canon abilities. I'll give you an example. So if I have an ability that allows me to find a useful item, like a small, mundane, useful item, I can find it in the environment, or like I just happen to have it on me. That's not something my character is consciously able to do. Like, you know, if I need a crowbar to open a jammed door, and I look at it scrounging around, my character doesn't consciously say, I'm gonna make a crowbar. That's not what that ability is. It is, I am lucky. I'm the guy who finds stuff, you know? I'm the guy who finds stuff. So if I start scrounging around, I, as a player, can say, I found a crowbar. Oh, and now I found a crowbar. Oh, how lucky for me. So, like, it's not something my character has consciously done. It's not an expenditure of, like, effort that my character does. It's just something that I can do, and there needs to be a limit on it because being able to do it infinitely can be problematic for the story as well. Completely unlimited abilities are an issue a lot of the time. That kind of stuff where like it's problem-solving abilities. Let's say the ability to spam infinitely, an ability designed to solve problems, is a problem itself. It can lead to a complete lack of challenge. So there needs to be a limit. And I just think that there are a lot of benefits to a per session limit as opposed to like a per rest limit. I find it intuitive. It just feels good, you know? It feels good to show up to every session knowing all of my abilities are available. Everything on my sheet is accessible to me as a player. As long as you don't have the kind of game that needs those tactical considerations, we're like, are we, you know, do we have time to rest before this fight? And as long as attrition is not a part of the assumed what is it? It's the resource game. You know, it's not a part of the game as it is for some. And some people enjoy that, and I'm not saying that like those should all go away. That definitely has its place. But I think for narrative games, like the lighter games, narrative games, I think a per session approach has so many advantages that it really needs to be considered. And I think going forward as I design games, it's going to be my default approach. Like, I'm going to need to have a reason not to use it. I like it so much. So, give it a try.